You want to hear the story? The whole messy, ugly truth of it? Not the version I tell at parties, the we just grew apart crap. The real one. The one that starts with a smell. Always for me, it starts with a smell. Wet concrete and jasmine. That's what the city smelled like that night. A weird combo, right? But that's how I remember it. The damp chill coming up from the pavement after the rain, and this cloying sweet scent from the bushes by my apartment door. I hated those bushes. My landlord thought they were classy. My name's Leo. And back then, my life was fine. I worked as a sound editor for indie podcasts and the occasional true crime documentary that never got picked up. My world was headphones, a messy desk covered in coffee rings, and the soft glow of 2 monitors in a room that never got enough light. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment that always felt like it was holding its breath. Quiet, neat, a place for one. My friends called me steady, reliable Leo. The guy who remembered to bring the extra charger, who would listen to your breakup drama at 2 a.m., who always paid his share of the bill. Boring, Leo, if I'm being honest with myself. I like the routines. The 8 a.m. coffee, bitter and black. The walk to the studio, same route. Nodding at the same old man with the terrier. The work. I'd get lost in it. Slicing out breaths, amplifying heartbeats in audio files, creating suspense from nothing. I was good at building tension in other people's stories. My own had none. Then there was Maya. I need you to picture her, but not in some perfect movie star way. That's not how it was. She was all sharp angles and soft contradictions. Hair the color of dark honey but always pulled into a messy knot that was coming undone. Eyes that could be warm as whiskey one second and distant as a frozen lake the next. She wore these big, worn-out sweaters that swallowed her whole, but her hands were always moving. Quick, precise, like a pianist or a surgeon. She was a ceramicist. Had a small studio downtown filled with dust and the quiet spinning hum of the wheel. We met because of a faulty sink. My kitchen faucet started screaming like a banshee. My landlord, useless as ever, gave me her number. She fixes things, he'd said with a shrug. Artist type. Cheap. She came over on a Tuesday evening. I was elbow deep in audio, trying to isolate a single clean footstep from a muddy recording. The buzzer went. I opened the door, and there she was, a toolbox in one hand, smelling of clay and lemongrass. Not wet concrete and jasmine. Clay and lemongrass. I hear you have a dying whale in your kitchen, she said, not smiling, but her eyes were. That was the first thing I noticed. The smile that never quite made it to her mouth, but lived entirely in her eyes. She fixed the faucet in 10 minutes. I made terrible coffee. We talked. About the tension in clay, how it holds memory. How a pot can look perfect but have a weak spot no one sees until the kiln fires it and it cracks. I told her about isolating sounds. How you can hear loneliness in the empty space between words. It felt profound. Stupid maybe, but profound. We just clicked. You know that feeling? When you're talking to someone, and it's not small talk, it's like you're both tuning into the same strange, quiet frequency. That was the beginning. The good part. The part I replay on a loop in my head, even now. The contrast? God, the contrast? It started slow. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into her dragging me to a 24-hour diner at 3 a.m. because she had a vision for a glaze and couldn't sleep. I'd watch her work in her studio, covered in gray slip, completely focused, a little frown between her brows. She'd get so quiet. A different quiet from my apartments. Hers was a charged, creative quiet. Mine was just empty. She filled it. She brought over a hideous, lopsided mug she'd made. It's flawed, she said matter-of-factly. Like you. I laughed. I used it every day. I still have it. A stupid, cracked thing. I can't throw it out. My friends liked her. She's intense, ma'am, my buddy Mark said, after she'd passionately argued about the ethics of documentary filmmaking for an hour. But she's good for you. You seem awake. I did. I felt awake. For the first time, my life wasn't just fine. It was vibrant, confusing, a little terrifying. She had these moods, sudden, deep silences where she'd stare out a window for minutes, completely gone. Then she'd snap back, brighter than ever, kissing me, making plans, full of chaotic energy. I told myself it was artistic temperament. Passion. I found it thrilling. It wasn't boring. The first real, what's the word? Not a red flag. A pink flag? A beige flag? A tremor. It was a tiny thing. We were at my place, I was editing. She was reading on my couch, curled up like a cat. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Mark about football. I didn't reach for it. Just let it buzz. From the couch, without looking up from her book, she said, "Aren't you going to get that?" "Nah, it's just Mark. I'll text him later." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, her voice perfectly flat, "You always do that." "Do what?" "You always know who it is. You always know exactly what they want. You're always managing everyone's expectations, even mine." It felt like a slap. A cold, small slap. "I'm just being considerate," I said, defensive, not letting the phone interrupt us. She finally looked at me. That frozen lake look. "Is that what you're doing? Or are you just afraid of what might be on there if you didn't already know?" I didn't have an answer. The moment passed. She came over, kissed my forehead. "Sorry," she whispered. "I'm being weird. Long day." She smelled like clay and my laundry detergent. I let it go. I told myself she was just tired. But a little seed of unease was planted. How did she know I always knew? I did. I was a planner, a manager. Was that so bad? Other little things. She never talked about her family. Just a hard no when I asked about visiting her hometown. She'd sometimes get a text and her whole face would close off, her thumbs flying in a reply before she shoved the phone away. Once, I woke up at 4 a.m. and she wasn't in bed. I found her sitting in the dark living room, just staring at the blank TV screen. "Bad dream," she'd said. Her hand was ice cold. I loved her. I think I loved her more because of these cracks. It made her real. It made me feel needed. Steady, reliable Leo. The guy who could be her anchor. How arrogant was that? The big thing, the thing that ends this part of the story, happened last Thursday. It was our 7-month anniversary. Not a real anniversary, but she joked about it, so I'd planned a nice dinner at home. I was cooking. Or trying to. I'd bought flowers. I'd even cleaned the apartment properly, not just a surface tidy. She was late. Not hugely. 40 minutes. No call. Straight to voicemail. That cold feeling started in my gut. I pushed it down. She's an artist. She lost track of time. The kiln is on. An hour late, the pasta was glue. I was staring at my phone, willing it to ring, when I heard a key in the door. My breath came out in a rush. Relief. "See? Nothing wrong." She walked in. She looked normal. A little flushed. She was wearing the big sweater I loved. "Hey," she said, dropping her bag. "Sorry. Studio time just vanished." "It's okay," I said, going to kiss her. And that's when I smelled it. Not clay, not lemongrass, wet concrete. And jasmine. The exact specific smell from outside my apartment building. The smell of the damp street and those stupid, sweet bushes. She'd been here. Outside. For how long? I pulled back. "Everything okay? Your phone's off." "Died," she said quickly. Too quickly, already walking towards the kitchen. "Wow, you cooked. Smells. Ambitious." I stood in the hallway, frozen. The smell was on her clothes, in her hair. She'd been standing outside, maybe in the rain, watching the windows. My windows? Why? "Maya," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. She turned, and for a fraction of a second, before the warm, apologetic smile spread across her face, I saw something else. A calculation. A flicker of something hard and assessing. Then it was gone. "Yeah, Leo?" All the little tremors, the silences, the closed-off looks, they suddenly lined up, pointing to this moment. To this woman in my kitchen, smelling of my street. Lying to me about where she'd been. I opened my mouth. The question was right there. Why do you smell like you were standing outside our building? But I didn't ask it. Reliable Leo. Steady Leo. Conflict-averse Leo. I swallowed the question. It tasted like acid and cold fear. "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Let's eat. It's probably ruined." She laughed, the sound bright and normal. "We'll order pizza." "I'm starving." We ate pizza. We watched a movie. She fell asleep on my shoulder, her breathing deep and even. I sat there, stiff, staring at the flickering screen. Her scent, my street's scent, still faintly clinging to her. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about the weak spot in the clay, the one you can't see until the fire reveals it. I thought I was the kiln, the steady, reliable heat. But what if I was the clay? And what if the crack wasn't in her but in the story she'd been building for me from the very first day? The movie ended. The screen went dark, reflecting our still forms on the couch. Her phone, now charging on the coffee table, lit up with a notification. A single silent line of text glowed in the dark room. I couldn't see the message, just the sender's name. A name I didn't recognize. Asterisk, Elias. The name burned in the dark. Asterisk, Elias. A green square of light on the black screen. I stared at it until my eyes watered, until the afterimage was seared onto my retina. Maya shifted against my shoulder, a soft sigh escaping her lips. She smelled of sleep and still, faintly, of the night outside. Of my street. My mind was a trapped animal, throwing itself against the walls of my skull. Elias. Who is Elias? A friend from the studio? A gallery owner? A brother she never mentioned. But the cold, sick feeling in my gut knew. Friends don't make you stand in the rain for an hour smelling of concrete and secrets before walking into your boyfriend's anniversary dinner. Friends don't make your face go that blank, that hard, for a split second when you're caught in a lie. I had to know. Carefully, so carefully, I extricated myself from under her. She murmured, curled tighter into the couch cushion. I stood over her, watching the rise and fall of her chest. In sleep, the sharp angles of her face softened. She looked young, vulnerable, the woman who made me a flawed mug, the artist lost in her visions. It warred violently with the image of her standing outside in the dark, looking up at our windows. My windows. I took a step towards the coffee table. The phone had dimmed, but a tap would wake it. I could see the notification preview. Just one tap. My hand hovered over it. Steady, reliable Leo. The guy who didn't snoop. The guy who trusted. The guy who was maybe a colossal fool. I couldn't do it. Not like that. Not while she slept a few feet away. It felt like violating something more intimate than her privacy. It felt like breaking the last fragile piece of the us I thought we were. I pulled my hand back as if shocked. I spent the rest of the night in the armchair, watching her. I dissected every memory, every tremor, as I'd called them. The silences. The evasions about her past. The way she'd sometimes look at me like she was studying a specimen, not kissing a lover. The phone call she'd take in the other room, her voice a low, urgent murmur I could never make out. I'd thought it was gallery business. Now every hushed conversation was a potential conversation with Elias. The morning was a grotesque pantomime of normalcy. The smell of wet concrete was gone from her hair, replaced by my shampoo. She made coffee, humming softly. She used the ugly mug. "You're quiet," she said, leaning against the counter. Her eyes were warm whiskey again. No trace of the frozen lake. "Didn't sleep well," I said, which was the truth. A safe, edited version of it. She came over, wrapped her arms around my waist, and rested her head on my chest. "I'm sorry about last night. Really, I got totally absorbed. You know how I get." I held her. I breathed in the scent of her. I felt the familiar shape of her against me. And for the first time, it felt like holding a stranger. A beautifully crafted stranger. "I know," I mumbled into her hair. The next few days were an exercise in psychological torture. I was hyper-aware of everything. The ping of her phone was a physical jolt. If she left the room with it, my hearing strained to its limit, trying to catch a tone, a word. I started noticing patterns I'd blissfully ignored. She never left her phone unlocked and unattended. Never. It was always face down, or in her pocket, or clutched in her hand. She had a passcode I didn't know. I'd never asked. Why would I? I became a detective in my own life. I checked the call log on our landline bill. She never used it. I casually asked about her day, probing for inconsistencies. I drove past her studio at odd hours, my heart hammering, seeing nothing but the closed roll-up door. I felt sick with myself. This wasn't me. This was paranoid. Pathetic. But the alternative, blind trust, felt like willful suicide. The breaking point, the moment the quiet investigation turned into something else, came a week later. I was supposed to be at a sound mixing session across town. It got canceled last minute. A client's illness. I didn't text Maya. A stupid, childish test. I'd go home, surprise her, maybe suggest an early dinner. See her reaction? I walked the usual route, nodding at the old man with the terrier. The day was clear, no smell of wet concrete. Just city smells. Exhaust, fried food, dust. I approached our building, my eyes automatically going up to our third-floor windows. The curtains were drawn in the living room. Odd for a sunny afternoon. I let myself in, the silence of the apartment feeling different now. Not empty, waiting. "Maya?" I called out. No answer. Her studio door The small second bedroom we'd converted was closed. She sometimes closed it when working, to contain the clay dust. I walked over, heard nothing. No wheel, no radio. I knocked softly. "Hey, you in there?" Silence. I turned the handle. The door was locked. She never locked it. Never. The cold feeling from the night of the anniversary flooded back, icier, deeper. I stood there, staring at the plain white door. My heart was a drum solo in my ears. She's in there. And she's not alone. The thought was instant, absolute. I backed away. I didn't know what to do. Pound on the door? Demand she open it? I imagined her face, that calculated look, asking me why I was home early. I imagined another face behind her. Elias. Instead, I did something else. Something quiet and terrible. I went to the kitchen and took the spare key from the junk drawer. It was for emergencies. Was this an emergency? My shaking hands said yes. I didn't use it. Not yet. I sat on the couch in the silent living room, the key digging into my palm. I waited. I listened. I heard nothing for 20 minutes. Then, the softest click of a lock turning. The studio door opened slowly. Maya stepped out, alone. She was pulling her hair back into its usual knot, her face flushed, not with creativity, but with a kind of heated intensity. She didn't see me at first. She turned back to the room, said something low, her voice a tender murmur I'd never heard her use with anyone but me. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "Same time?" Then she closed the door and turned. She jumped a foot in the air when she saw me on the couch. "Leo! Jesus! You scared me! What are you doing home?" Her hand flew to her throat. Her eyes were wide, but they darted to the studio door. To me. To the front door. "Session was cancelled," I said, my voice eerily calm. "What are you up to?" "Oh, just glazing, messy work. Didn't want dust everywhere." She smiled, but it was tight. She walked towards the kitchen, putting space between her and the studio. "Want some tea?" "Who were you talking to?" The question hung in the air, blunt and heavy. She stopped. The frozen lake look returned, solidifying her features. "What?" "I heard you. You said tomorrow, same time. Who was in there with you?" A beat of silence. Then she laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Leo, are you serious?" "I was on the phone." Bluetooth headset. I was talking to the gallery about a delivery tomorrow. She tapped her ear as if remembering a headset that wasn't there. I must have left it in the studio. It was a good lie, plausible. But I'd heard the tone. That wasn't a gallery talk tone. That was an intimate whisper. And the locked door. The locked door screamed the truth. "Right," I said. I didn't push. The key in my hand felt like a betrayal. If I confronted her now, she'd have an excuse, and I'd have nothing but a feeling. I needed proof. I needed to see. The next day, I called in sick. I told Maya I had a migraine, needed to lie in a dark room all day. I heard her move around the apartment, quiet, considerate. She brought me water and pills, her cool hand on my forehead. The hypocrisy of it made me want to scream. At 1 p.m., I heard her get ready. The soft click of her toolbox, the front door opening and closing. I gave it 5 minutes. Then I was up, the migraine forgotten. I went straight to the studio door. It was unlocked now. I pushed it open. The room was as it always was. Chaotic, dusty, beautiful. Half-finished pots, bags of clay, buckets of slip. The wheels stood silent. Nothing seemed out of place, but the air felt different, charged. I walked in, my eyes scanning every surface. I felt like I was contaminating her space, but the urge was stronger than guilt. I looked for anything. A note. A man's item. Something. On her work table, under a sketchpad filled with swirling glaze designs, I found it. Not a love note. Something worse. It was a bill. For a private post office box downtown. The billing name was Maya Vance. Our address? But the box number was unfamiliar. The most recent charge was from yesterday. Why did she need a PO? Box? What was she receiving or sending that couldn't come here? Then, in the small trash can by her desk, crumpled into a tight ball, was a receipt. I smoothed it out. It was from a pharmacy across town. Not our local one. Purchased 2 days ago, antiseptic, bandages, surgical tape, and a single specific item that made the blood drain from my face. A cheap, pay-as-you-go mobile phone. My mind, trained to build narratives from fragments, assembled a terrifying story. Secret meetings. A locked room. A private mailbox. A burner phone. This wasn't an affair. This was operational. This was a secret life running parallel to ours, and I was the oblivious set decoration. I took out my phone and took pictures of the bill and the receipt. My hands were steady. The sound editor was gone. In his place was someone cold and focused. I left everything exactly as I'd found it. She came home at 6, smelling of clay and fresh air. She checked on me, felt my forehead. "You still feel warm," she said, her voice full of concern. A masterful performance. "I'm okay," I croaked, playing my part. That night, as she slept, I finally did it. I took her phone from the nightstand. My thumb hovered over the screen. It would light up, ask for a passcode. I had one guess. I thought of the date we met, the date of our first dinner. I typed in her studio's street number. Nothing. Then I remembered the P.O. box number. My fingers, cold and clumsy, entered it. The phone unlocked. The world shrank to the glow of the screen. I went straight to the messages. I scrolled past threads with friends, with galleries, with me. My heart was a stone. And then I found it. A thread with no saved contact. Just a number. The last message was from today. Asks unknown number, absolutely all set for tomorrow. Is the space clear? Asks Maya. Yes, he'll be gone all day. Usual time? Asks unknown number. Absolutely good. E will bring the rest. Maya. Understood. Tell him to be careful. E. Elias. I scrolled up. The messages were sparse, cryptic. Mentions of packages, the drop, cleaning the studio, no professions of love, no intimacy. Just cold, logistical planning. This was no romance. This was a transaction, a conspiracy. And my apartment, my life, was the stage for it. The final message I saw, sent a month ago, made my breath stop. Asterisk, unknown number. Absolutely, is the mark still unaware? Asterisk, Maya? Absolutely, completely. He's perfect. Predictable. The mark. I was the mark. I locked her phone, placed it back on the nightstand. I lay down beside her, staring at the ceiling. The crack in the clay wasn't just a flaw. It was the fundamental fissure. The kiln hadn't revealed her weakness. She had used my steady, predictable heat to fire her own secret creation. And I had happily provided the fuel. The understanding that settled over me wasn't hot anger. It was a vast, desolate cold. This wasn't a problem we could talk through. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She wasn't just lying to me. She was using me. My routines, my apartment, my trust, they were all part of her blueprint. For what? I didn't know yet, but the why didn't matter in that moment. All that mattered was the truth. I was in love with a fiction, and the author was sleeping next to me planning the next plot point. I couldn't just walk away. Not now. She'd know I knew. And the people in those messages. Elias, the others. They weren't the kind you just break up with. The locked door, the burner phone, the word Mark, they spelled a danger that was far bigger than a broken heart. Getting out wouldn't be a conversation. It would be an escape. And I had no idea how to begin, or what waited for me on the other side. But I knew, with a certainty that was colder than the concrete outside, that simply leaving was no longer an option. I was in the story now, and it was a thriller. The cold didn't leave me. It settled in my bones. A permanent winter. I functioned. That's what I did. I went to work. I edited sounds. I smiled at Maya. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings, my lips like frozen meat against her warm cheek. I was an actor in the final, terrifying act of a play, where I just learned my character was the doomed fool. The knowledge was a live wire in my brain, sparking against every thought. The mark. Predictable. My routines, once a comfort, were now a prison of my own making, a schedule she could plot against. My steadiness was a weapon she'd turned against me. The apartment wasn't a home. It was a set, and every object felt like a prop. The ugly mug was no longer a symbol of flawed affection. It was a piece of evidence, a trophy. I had to know what they were doing. The packages, the drop. I couldn't go to the police with a screenshot of cryptic texts and a pharmacy receipt. I'd sound paranoid. And if they were watching her, watching us, as the messages implied, then going to the authorities might trigger something worse. I was alone. Reliable Leo had no one to tell. Who would believe that Maya, the passionate ceramicist, was what? A criminal? A spy? I didn't even know. So, I watched. I became a ghost in my own life. I bought a voice-activated recorder, a tiny, cheap thing, and hid it in a hollowed-out book on the living room shelf. pointed at the main space. I needed to hear her when I wasn't there, when she thought she was alone. The day after I found the messages, I left for work as usual. I walked 2 blocks, then ducked into a cafe, my heart hammering. I opened an app on my phone, synced to the recorder. For hours, there was nothing but the hum of the refrigerator, the distant rush of city traffic. Then, at 11:17 a.m., the sound of the front door opening. Her footsteps, not alone. A man's voice, low and unfamiliar. "Is it clear?" "He's gone until 6. We have time." Maya's voice, but different. Stripped of its warmth, all business. "Elias isn't happy. He thinks the boyfriend is a loose end." My blood turned to ice water. I clutched the phone, pressing it to my ear. "Leo is not a problem," Maya said, her voice edged with impatience. "He's a schedule. He's a habit. He's the perfect cover. A sound editor with no drama, no police connections. A boring, predictable life. No one looks twice." The man grunted. "Elias says sentiment is a weakness. Tell Elias my sentiment is what secured the location," she snapped. There was a sound of something heavy being set down. A thud on the floorboards. "This is the last one. Then we're square. I'm done." "That's not how it works, Maya. You know that. You're in. There's no done." A long silence. I could hear my own breath rasping in the cafe's quiet corner. Then her voice, quieter, defeated. "Just take it. It's in the usual place, the kiln." The kiln. Her electric kiln in the corner of the studio, of course. Not for firing clay. For hiding things. The packages. I heard scraping, the squeak of the kiln door opening. A grunt of effort from the man. Heavy. Good. The buyer will be pleased. "Get it out of here," Maya said, her voice tight. Footsteps. The front door opening and closing. Then, for a long time, nothing. Just empty apartment sounds. Then, a sound I'll never forget. A single choked sob, raw and full of agony. Then silence again. She cried for maybe 10 seconds. Then it cut off, as if a switch had been flipped. More silence. Then, the normal sounds of her moving around, making tea, the radio turning on to a classical station. I sat in that cafe, numb. The confirmation was worse than the suspicion. I was a loose end, a schedule, the perfect cover, and whatever was in that kiln was heavy, valuable, and illegal enough to have a buyer, and she was trapped in it too. That sob, it was real. But it didn't change anything, it just made the horror more complex. She might be a victim, but she'd made me one too. I had to see. I had to know what was in my home. My opportunity came 2 days later. She said she was meeting a gallery owner for lunch, would be gone for 3 hours. The moment the door closed, I moved. I went straight to the studio, the kiln. It was cool. Hadn't been used for clay in weeks. I opened the small, heavy door. It was empty. Clean. But in the back, behind the heating elements, I saw a false panel, expertly fitted. My fingers, trembling, found the catch. It swung open. It wasn't full of drugs, as I'd feared. It was worse, in a way. It was full of carefully wrapped, dense clay bricks. But they were the wrong color. Too pale, too uniform. I lifted one. It was unbelievably heavy for its size. My mind racing landed on the only thing that made sense. Not clay. Bullion. Gold. Platinum. Something dense and precious, molded to look like studio material. This was a smuggling operation. My apartment was a way station. My predictable, boring life was the camouflage for moving stolen precious metals. And Maya, she was the mule, the artist with the perfect excuse for having heavy, dusty materials. The scale of it crushed me. This was organized, professional, and I was the idiot living in the middle of it. I heard the key in the front door. Panic, pure and electric, shot through me. I fumbled the false panel shut, closed the kiln door, and stumbled out of the studio just as she walked in. "Leo? You're home early." Her eyes went immediately to the studio door behind me, then back to my face, scanning. "Forgot a hard drive," I said, the lie automatic. My voice sounded strange. "Hi. Big project." She didn't smile. She just looked at me, her gaze analytical, assessing. "The frozen lake. You look pale." "Just stressed. Work." I edged toward the door. "I have to get back." "Okay." She didn't move to kiss me. She just stood there, blocking the path to the exit, watching me. "Be careful." That was the point of no return. The moment the cold terror turned into a plan, I couldn't stay, but I couldn't just run. They'd find me. Elias would see to it. I was a loose end, and loose ends get trimmed. I had to disappear. But to do that, I needed money. I needed a new identity. I needed to vanish in a way that wouldn't make them look for me. A dead man isn't a threat. But a missing one? A missing Mark who might have gone to the police? That's a problem. So I decided to give them a dead man. It took a week of silent, frantic planning. I withdrew cash in small amounts. I bought a used, pay-as-you-go phone from a sketchy guy in a different borough. I rented a storage unit under a fake name, paying in cash, and began stashing clothes, a cheap laptop, my passport, and the cash there. I became a ghost in preparation. The final piece was the scene. It had to be an accident. Something messy, believable, with no body to find. Fire was the obvious answer. The building had old wiring. A tragic electrical fire in the sound editor's apartment, started by his overloaded equipment. He was a workaholic. Always home. A tragic loss. I could use my own skills. I found a long, looping audio track of a raging fire I'd edited for a documentary. I could play it at full volume from my computer, set on a timer to mask any initial sounds. I'd read that in a true crime podcast. Ironic, the night I chose, Maya was supposed to be at an all-night glaze firing workshop. She'd be gone from 8 p.m. until morning. It was my window. My hands didn't shake as I set things up. The cold focus was absolute. I placed the small controlled incendiary device, constructed from online instructions, a terrifying leap into the abyss, near the old power strip behind my desk. I set the audio track timer. I packed a single backpack with the bare essentials: the cash, the new phone, a change of clothes. I left my old phone on the desk next to the ugly mug, a final piece of the set dressing. I looked around the apartment for the last time. The place that had been just fine, then vibrant, then a prison, now a tomb. I felt nothing, just the cold. At 10 p.m., the audio would start. At 10:05, the device would spark. By 10:15, the old, dry apartment would be an inferno. And I would be on a bus to nowhere, a ghost, before the first fire engine arrived. I gave myself a 10-minute head start. I walked out the door at 9:50 p.m. I didn't look back. I took the stairs, not the elevator. I hit the street and turned left, away from my usual route, melting into the night crowd. I was 2 blocks away when I heard the first distant sirens. A strange, detached part of my mind noted they were ahead of schedule. My heart, which had been a silent stone, began to pound. It's done. It's done. I ducked into a subway station, heading for the bus depot. I was on the downtown platform when my new, cheap phone buzzed. An unknown number. Ice filled my veins. I stared at it. It buzzed again, and again. Impossible. No one had this number. With a dread deeper than any I'd ever known, I answered. I didn't speak. Her voice came through, calm, clear, and utterly terrifying. Leo. I couldn't breathe. The workshop was canceled, she said, as if discussing the weather. I came home early. I found your little presentation. Very dramatic. The fire audio is a nice touch. You always were good with sound. I leaned against the filthy subway tile, the world spinning. Here's what's going to happen, she continued, her voice devoid of all the warmth, all the soft contradictions. This was the true voice. The one from the messages. You're going to turn around. You're going to come back. You're going to walk in the door like nothing happened. Because if you don't, the next call is to Elias. And he doesn't make scenes, Leo. He makes people disappear for real. No soundtracks, no evidence. Just gone. She paused. I could hear the sirens in the background of her call. Closer now. She was still there. In the burning building? Outside? You're not a loose end, Leo, she said, and her voice softened into something worse than a threat. A perverse intimacy. You're my alibi. You're my story. And stories need their main character until the very last page. Now come home, let's finish this properly. The call ended. I stood on the platform, the roar of an approaching train filling the tunnel. The point of no return wasn't behind me. In the fire. It was here. In this moment. I could get on the train, run, take my chances with Elias. But she'd found the phone. She'd known everything. My predictability had run deeper than my routines. It had infected my very attempts at escape. She'd anticipated me. She'd written this twist. The train screeched to a halt, doors opening. A crowd of people pushed past me, getting on, getting off. Life moving forward. I didn't move. I saw my reflection in the dark train window, pale, hollow-eyed, a ghost already. The sirens above were a fading echo. She'd won. She'd always been writing the story. I was just the mark, and the mark's job is to play his part until the curtain falls. Slowly, I turned. I walked back up the stairs towards the smell of smoke and jasmine, towards the end of the story I'd never asked to be in. The cold inside me was complete now. It wasn't fear, it was acceptance. I was broken. I was beaten. And I was going back because the only thing more terrifying than the trap was the unknown shape of the punishment for trying to leave it. The walk back was the longest of my life. The crack in the clay wasn't a flaw. It was the planned fracture line all along. And I was the piece that was about to be cleanly, finally, snapped off. The smoke was a greasy smear in the night sky, visible from 2 blocks away. It didn't smell like a normal fire. It smelled like melting plastic, burning wire insulation, and underneath it all, the ghost of wet, scorched concrete. My feet carried me forward, each step heavier than the last, a marionette pulled by a string of pure animal terror. The sirens were a converging chorus now, red and blue lights painting the buildings in frantic strokes. I rounded the corner. My street was chaos. Fire trucks, their hoses snaking like great anacondas, blocked the entrance. Police tape fluttered. Neighbors huddled in clumps, wrapped in robes, their faces lit with the voyeuristic horror of someone else's disaster. Their homes were safe. Their lives were intact. They were watching mine burn. And there, standing just outside the tape, talking to a firefighter with a clipboard, was Maya. She was wearing the same big sweater from the night of the anniversary. Her hair was loose, a dark cascade over her shoulders. Even from here, I could see the smudge of soot on her cheek. She looked small, fragile, devastated. She was gesturing towards the building, her hand flying to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. The firefighter nodded, his expression grim and sympathetic. She was giving a performance worthy of an award. Then, as if sensing the weight of my stare, she turned her head. Her eyes found me in the crowd. The performance didn't drop, it deepened. Her face crumpled with a relief so profound it looked like pain. She broke away from the firefighter, ducked under the tape, and ran to me. "Leo! Oh my God, Leo!" Her voice was a raw, public scream. She threw her arms around me, burying her face in my chest. Her body trembled. To anyone watching, it was the embrace of a woman who thought she'd lost everything. I stood stiff, my arms at my sides. I could feel the eyes of the neighborhood on us. The poor couple, the artist and her sound editor. Their home, their life, gone. She pulled back, her hands gripping my face. Her eyes were wide, swimming with manufactured tears. "Where were you? I thought you were inside. I thought you were—" She broke off into a sob. "I went out for a walk," I said, my voice a monotone. "To clear my head. For the bid project. I was speaking our lines, feeding the narrative. The predictable workaholic, stressed, taking a late walk. It was plausible. A police officer approached us, his notebook out. 'Sir, are you the resident? Leonardo Vance?' I nodded. Leo. Leo the Mark. Your wife says you were home when she left for her workshop." Maya's grip on my arm tightened, a silent warning. Her nails dug in through my jacket. "I was," I said. I couldn't focus. Decided to get some air. Must have just missed the start of it. The words tasted like ash. The officer made a note. "Lucky for you, the fire marshal's initial look suggests an electrical fault. Origin point seems to be your home office. Lots of specialized equipment in there?" "Yes," I whispered. "Sound editing. Computers, speakers, amplifiers." He nodded, clicking his pen shut. "We'll need a full statement from both of you, but not tonight. You have somewhere to go?" Maya answered for us, her voice trembling beautifully. "My studio. It has a small loft. We'll manage." We were ushered away from the scene, 2 more victims in the night. We walked in silence for 3 blocks, the distance between our bodies a canyon. The moment we turned a corner, out of sight of the crowd, her hand dropped from my arm. The tremor vanished from her voice. "The storage unit," she said, not looking at me. "Under the name Peter Walsh. Clever, not clever enough. You left a digital receipt in the trash on your computer. I recovered it before I triggered the device early." I stopped walking. "You triggered it?" In the orange glow of a streetlight, her face was a mask of cool efficiency. The soot smudge was the only hint of the chaos we'd left behind. "Of course I did. Once I saw your little theater set up, I knew your timeline. I advanced it, made it more credible. A faulty timer, sparking earlier than the audio cue. More tragic, more chaotic, less time for anyone to question the nature of the accelerant." She started walking again. "Come on. We can't stand here." "You called me," I said, following her, a dog on a chain. You have people who can make me disappear. Why didn't you just let me run? Why make me come back? She didn't answer until we reached the door of her studio, a nondescript building in a quiet commercial block. She unlocked it, ushered me into the dark, cavernous space. The smell of clay was overwhelming. She flipped on a single work light which cast long, distorted shadows from the wheels and shelves of unfinished pots. They looked like tombstones. Because a dead boyfriend in a fire is a tragedy, she said, locking the door behind us with a heavy, final click. A missing boyfriend after a fire is an investigation. Investigations are messy. They look at bank records, phone records, they talk to friends. They might find the storage unit. They might find the fake ID you were working on. They might dig until they hit something I can't afford them to hit. She walked to a sink and began scrubbing the soot from her hands. A grieving couple who lost everything clinging to each other. That's a closed loop. It's a clean, sad story. And then, in a few weeks, when the insurance money comes through and the police have filed their report, the grieving couple quietly separates. He's too traumatized, he moves away to start fresh. She pours herself into her art. It's believable. It's neat. You wanted to be a ghost, Leo, but ghosts are suspicious. I need you to be a victim. A public, documented victim. And then you can fade away, with my help. And if I say no? The question was weak, hollow. She smiled then, a small, cold thing that never touched her eyes. Then Elias meets you. He's been wanting to. He thinks my attachment to you is a liability. Proving him wrong is the only reason you're breathing this clay dust right now instead of floating in the river. The word attachment hung in the air, grotesque and poisonous. What were you moving? I asked, my voice barely a sound. In the kiln. Her expression shuddered. You don't need to know. You just need to play your part. For a little while longer. I was the mark, I said. The words were a conclusion I'd already reached, but saying them to her made them real in a new, devastating way. She was silent for a long moment, studying me. The frozen lake in her eyes had thawed into something more complex. A hint of regret, maybe, or just fatigue. You were the setting, she corrected softly. A quiet, stable, unremarkable life. The perfect backdrop. I didn't plan for you to be you. The one who remembered the extra charger. Who listened. She looked away towards the silent kiln. That was the complication. Was any of it real? I hated myself for asking. The mug was real, she said so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Then she straightened. The moment of weakness gone? Get some sleep. The loft is up there. Tomorrow we meet with the insurance adjuster. We cry. We hold hands. We are in shock. You can do that, can't you? You're good with subtext. I climbed the narrow stairs to the small loft, a space barely big enough for a mattress and a dresser. I didn't sleep. I listened to the sounds of her moving below, the soft scrape of a tool, the rustle of paper, the occasional soft ping of her phone. I was a prisoner in a cage of her making, and my sentence was to perform my own grief. The next week was a masterclass in sustained horror. We played our roles perfectly. We gave statements, sitting side by side on a borrowed couch in a friend's apartment, my hand limp in hers. We met the insurance woman, a kind-faced person who spoke in hushed tones. Maya did most of the talking, her voice breaking at all the right moments. I just nodded, my eyes hollow, the traumatized man rendered silent by loss. It wasn't hard to act. I was traumatized. I had lost everything. Just not in the way they thought. We were given a temporary payout, enough for clothes, essentials. We bought identical cheap versions of our old life. The performances were constant. At night, in the studio, we retreated into a tense, wordless truce. She slept on the cot below. I stared at the ceiling in the loft. The only thing we shared was the crushing awareness of the lie. I thought the end would come with the insurance settlement, a check, a handshake, and then my staged disappearance. But Elias had other ideas. He came to the studio one afternoon when I was supposedly at a meeting with my now-terminated employer. I had come back early. Again. A habit. I was outside the roll-up door, fumbling for the key she'd given me, when I heard the voices inside. His voice. Low, gravelly, devoid of any inflection that could be called human. Final shipment is tonight. The buyer's impatient. The fire caused complications. I know, Maya's voice strained. The space is gone. I need time to establish a new one. You don't have time. You have the artist's retreat. Upstate. Isolated. You leave tomorrow, we use that. A pause. He's coming with me. It's the cover. A couple trying to heal after a tragedy? No. The finality in the voice was absolute. The boyfriend doesn't come back from the retreat. A hiking accident. A fall? It's clean, it fits the narrative of a man unhinged by grief. My blood turned to slush in my veins. This was it. Not a fading away, a hiking accident. Elias's preferred method of tying up loose ends. I'll handle it, Maya said, her voice suddenly sharp. My way. You need me for the handoff. The buyer knows me, trusts me. You kill him now, and I walk. Try explaining that to your bosses. A long, dangerous silence. I could imagine him staring at her. Those dead eyes, calculating. You have sentiment, Elias said, the word a curse. I have a method, she fired back. And my method works. He comes to the retreat. He has the accident, but I decide when and how. Or this whole pipeline collapses, and you can explain to the buyer why his last shipment is at the bottom of a ravine. I heard a low chuckle, a sound that held no humor. 1 week, Maya. You get 1 week at that retreat to tidy up your mess. Then I tidy it up for you. I heard footsteps, the sound of the side door opening and closing. He was gone. I stood there, frozen, the key biting into my palm. She had just bargained for me. For 1 more week. To do the job herself. When I walked in, she was standing by the kiln, her back to me, her shoulders rigid. I heard, I said. She didn't turn. Then you know you have a week. To do what? Wait for you to push me off a cliff? Finally, she faced me. She looked exhausted, aged. The sharp angles of her face seemed sharper, carved from worry. To give you a chance, she said, a real one. Why? The question was a plea. Because the mug was real, she repeated, her voice cracking. And because I'm tired. I've been doing this for 10 years, Leo, paying off a debt that was never mine to pay. You were supposed to be the last stop. The quiet, normal life after the storm. But I brought the storm with me. She took a step towards me, her eyes searching mine. I can't get out, but maybe you can. The plan was insane. A double blind. At the retreat, a remote cabin owned by a gallery collective. I would have my accident, but it would be staged. She would give me everything from the storage unit, the cash, the fake ID, the new phone. She would report me missing after a fall during a solo hike. There would be a search, eventually called off, and I would be gone for real this time, with a head start and a new name. She would be the grieving girlfriend, left behind yet again by tragedy, a figure so pitiful no one would ever suspect her. And Elias? I asked as we drove upstate the next day, the city shrinking in the rearview mirror. He'll be watching, from a distance. He'll expect a body. He'll want proof. I'll have to give him something. A piece of your clothing, torn on rocks. Your old wallet planted somewhere downstream. She glanced at me. It has to be convincing. The cabin was as isolated as promised, nestled in thick woods, overlooking a deep rocky gorge. The sound of a rushing river filled the air, a constant white noise that was both peaceful and menacing. For 3 days we played our final act, the shell-shocked couple, walking in the woods, speaking in hushed tones. We were waiting for the right moment, the right weather. On the 4th day, a storm rolled in. The sky turned the color of a bruise. The wind picked up, howling through the pines. It was perfect. Tonight, she said as we sat at the rough wooden table. She pushed an envelope towards me. Inside was everything. The cash, the ID for a man named David Miller, keys to a locker in a bus station 2 states over. When it's fully dark, during the worst of the wind, you go down the trail to the river. You leave your jacket, your old wallet with a little cash, and your real ID on the big flat rock by the eddy. You scuff the ground near the edge, then you follow the river east through the woods. 3 miles downstream there's an old forestry road. A car is waiting. The keys are in the envelope. Her instructions were precise, clinical. She had thought of everything. And you? I asked. I'll wait 2 hours. Then I'll call it in. I'll be hysterical. I'll lead them to the rock. She wouldn't look at me. The storm will have washed away any tracks. The river is high and fast. They'll assume you were swept away. They might never find a body. And Elias? I'll give him the coordinates of the rock. He'll send someone to check. They'll find the wallet. It will be enough. The finality of it settled between us. This was the last page. The crack in the clay, splitting us apart forever. As dusk fell, the storm broke with a vengeance. Rain lashed the windows. The wind screamed. I put on the dark, waterproof clothes she'd bought. I shoved the envelope inside my shirt. She stood by the door, a silhouette against the fire she'd built in the hearth. I'm sorry, she said, the words almost lost in the storm's roar. For the wet concrete. For the jasmine. for all of it. I wanted to say something, to curse her, to thank her, to something. But there were no words left in the hollowed-out shell of me. I just nodded. I opened the door, and the storm swallowed me whole. The woods were a nightmare of lashing branches, slippery mud, and utter blackness. The trail was a river of mud itself. I used a small, pen-sized flashlight shielding its beam. The roar of the actual river grew louder, a deep, hungry thunder. I found the flat rock by the eddy just as she'd described. I shrugged off my old jacket, the one she'd bought me last week, and laid it down. I placed the wallet. I used my foot to scuff the mud at the rock's edge, making it look like a slip. I threw a heavy branch into the raging current. It vanished instantly. I stood there for a moment, in the pounding rain, looking at the pathetic little tableau of my own death. Then I turned east, and began to fight my way through the undergrowth along the bank. I had gone maybe half a mile when I saw a light. Not my tiny beam, a stronger, wider flashlight cutting through the rain, coming from the direction of the cabin, coming towards me. My heart stopped. Elias. He hadn't waited. He'd come to watch. To verify. I dropped flat behind a fallen log, extinguishing my light. The beam swept over me, past me. I held my breath. The footsteps crunched closer, slow, deliberate. They stopped on the other side of the log. Leo. It was her voice. Maya. Relief then confusion flooded me. I raised my head. She stood there in a slicker, her hair plastered to her head. The flashlight in her hand pointed at the ground. Her face was pale, etched with a panic I'd never seen before. "What are you doing here?" I hissed. "You'll ruin it." "He's here," she said, her voice trembling. "Elias. He didn't wait. He's at the cabin. He said he wanted to see the evidence himself. He's coming down to the rock, now." The cold terror returned, sharper than ever. If Elias went to the rock and found the wallet, but didn't find a body or signs of a struggle convincing enough, he'd know. He'd come looking, and he'd find my tracks. Or he'd find me. Either way, the game was over. Maya grabbed my arm, her grip iron through the soaked sleeve. "There's no time. He'll be at the rock in minutes. If he doesn't see your body, he'll start searching. And he's not alone." As if to confirm her words, another light flickered through the trees behind her, higher up the slope. Closer to the cabin. A second person. They were sweeping the area. "Why are you here?" I whispered, the rain streaming down my face. "You should be at the cabin." Calling it in. Playing the part. She shook her head, water flying from her hair. "I couldn't. I tried. I stood there watching the door close behind you, and I couldn't." Her eyes, even in the dim light, held something I'd never seen before. Not calculation, not performance, desperation. I've spent 10 years being someone else's instrument, delivering their packages, cleaning up their messes, playing whatever role they assigned. You were the first person who just wanted me to be. The mug wasn't real, Leo, but my wanting to make it for you was. A branch snapped nearby. Too close. "He's coming," she breathed. The trail splits up ahead. One branch goes to the rock, the other follows the river, then cuts back towards the road. If you go now, fast and quiet, you might make it. And you? I go to the rock. I meet him. I tell him I couldn't wait, that I came to check on the scene myself. I show him the jacket, the wallet. I'm the grieving girlfriend making sure the job was done right. He'll believe that. He expects me to be thorough. The lie was elegant. It always was with her. But this time, I thought I saw the truth beneath it. She was sacrificing herself to the monster so I could slip past. "Come with me." I said the words were out before I could stop them. She stared at me, rain tracing paths down her cheeks like tears. "What?" "To the road. To the car." We both disappear. Elias hunts for 2 ghosts instead of 1. For a heartbeat, something flickered in her eyes. Hope, maybe. Or just the memory of what hope felt like. Then it died. "He has my brother," she said quietly. The words landed like stones in the space between us. "That's the debt. That's why I can't leave. Theo, he was 19 when he got tangled with Elias's crew. Stupid, greedy, just a kid. I made a deal. My skills, my artist cover, my complete obedience, in exchange for his life. He's not dead, Leo. He's just not alive. Somewhere. A ghost they keep in a box to make me dance." The second light was closer now. We had seconds. "Then we find him," I said. "After. Together. But you can't help him from inside the box they've put you in. And you can't help him dead." She looked at me, really looked, as if seeing me for the first time. Steady, reliable Leo, the mark, the setting, the man who just might be stupid enough to try. Go, she said. Follow the river. Don't look back. Maya, if I survive this night, I'll find you. David Miller. Bus station locker, 2 states over. Give me 1 month. If I don't come, you're free. Really free. No more strings. She pressed something into my palm. A small, smooth object. The ugly mug. She'd kept it. Brought it? For luck, she whispered. Now run. The woods swallowed me. Branches clawed at my face, mud sucked at my boots, the river roared its hungry song to my right. Behind me I heard voices. Elias's gravel, Maya's higher pitch, the performance of her life. I didn't stop. I couldn't. 3 miles, an eternity, a lifetime. When I finally burst onto the old forestry road, the storm was beginning to ease, the rain softening to a miserable drizzle. The car was there, a nondescript sedan the color of mud. The keys were in my pocket. I drove through the night, a ghost in a machine, the mug on the passenger seat like a talisman. I didn't know if she was alive or dead. I didn't know if I'd ever know. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The story wasn't over. The crack in the clay doesn't destroy the pot. It just makes it something else. Something new. And somewhere in the darkness behind me, the woman who made me a mark, and then made me a ghost, was still writing. I drove east, towards the dawn, the smell of wet concrete and jasmine fading with the miles, replaced by the clean, empty scent of rain on an open road. The last page had turned. But the book wasn't closed. Not yet.